behind me, you can see a high mountain lake that we have come and explored. The day is actually about over with now. So we're gonna have to backtrack and show you what it is we've done. Now, this is actually Merrium Lake. And Merrium Lake is below Mount Bora, close to Leatherman Peak as well. And if you saw a few weeks back, my kids and I tried summiting Leatherman Peak. And we didn't do very well because we took the hardest of the routes, which is not a route that I would ever suggest. A lot of class 4s and things like that. So we didn't make it up. So in looking for a better route up, the better route up, I found that Merrium Lake is over in this area. And so of course, if I'm gonna go through all the trouble of coming back up this way to make Leatherman Peak, you know, I wanted to go ahead and hit this lake because this is a lake I've wanted to come to for years. And so we're going to show you all about coming to Merrium Lake, and then next week we're going to try to summit Leatherman Peak again. We're going to see if we can do that. So let's backtrack again and kind of show you how today started. Go from there.
Welcome to Jared Scott Outdoors. This YouTube channel is dedicated to getting our youth more involved in the outdoors. To do this, I'll be out with family and friends doing all sorts of outdoor adventures. So to get to Merrium Lake or the trailhead for Leatherman Peak, which happens to be the same point, you'll want to get into the Pacimeri drainage. Most people will want to access it driving north through Howe on Highway 93 past Sawmill Canyon. On the day we drove through, there was a fire burning out in the sagebrush flats in front of Sawmill. I think it got put out before it got too big because we didn't see any smoke when we drove out the next day. Heading past Sawmill, keep going through the pass and drop into the Pacimeri Valley, and take the left into the upper Pacimeri and Burnt Creek area. The roads are still in really good shape at this point, but that will change drastically. There are actually a few turns and road changes that you'll need to make, so if you do come out this way, make sure you have a map of some sort. There are just too many roads crisscrossing the area, and it can get confusing even with a map. The further we went, the rougher the roads got, but they still weren't bad yet.
Well, this is definitely not a follow the signs to your destination kind of place. There's lots of different roads out here and crossroads and turns you have to make. We've made a wrong turn a couple times, but luckily I've got my phone and I can kind of follow my predetermined mapping that I did and some waypoints that I made. So you definitely got to know where you're going out here. The road is turned into a bumpier road. It's not the really nice dirt road that we had earlier. There's a handful of rocks you got to watch out for, but I've heard that the last 5 miles is just horrendous and that it takes an hour, literally an hour, to go 5 miles. So I'm very nervous to find out what that's like. And I'm guessing it's not this because, again, we hit some bad spots, but then we can go pretty quick in between them.
Sure enough, we ran into a sign that read, "Not advised for trailers or cars." This was the warning that the road was going to get a lot worse, and it did immediately. After some deep ruts and big rocks, we had to cross Mahogany Creek, which was no big deal, but it was just a sign of things to come. While the road did get worse, it really wasn't bad enough that it would take an hour to go 5 miles. Not yet anyways. It was here that we actually got a pretty good view of the area we were going into, and especially Leatherman Peak, the mountain we were hoping to hike the next day. At the east and west fork, take the west fork of the Pacimeri and then get ready because the road only gets rockier. What you need is clearance. There was only one steep hill that I put the truck into 4-wheel drive for, but really it's just the rocks that make the road so bad. There really isn't much in the way of ruts and such, just big boulders you have to slowly work over or around, and it just keeps going and going. Just when you think you're through the bad stuff as it gets better, it turns bad again, and again, and again. However, as long as you're patient, you can get through it okay, but you really do need to give yourself plenty of time. Needless to say, the end of the road could not have come soon enough, but we did make it, and I breathed a big sigh of relief.
All right, so we have finally made it to the campground here, and what a relief. I'll tell you what, you know, we thought 5 miles, and it ended up being actually more like 6 or so of pretty rough road. And I was looking like, I thought, hey, we're gonna get there in a little over a half hour. No, it did turn into an hour by the time we actually got here. The road you know, it cleared up and it was like, sweet, we're gonna make it here the rest of the way with smooth road, and then it got bad again. And so it really was a rough road. Lots of rocks, lots of slow stuff, just crawling over things, making sure you don't, you know, hit rocks underneath. And so it was quite the road. Now, we got here, and to my knowledge, from what we've seen, there isn't another vehicle out here. There's several picnic tables spread around here, so definitely a nice area to camp. Pretty little creek right here. We have yet to explore it, but it is a nice spot now that we got here, and I am surprised we have it to ourselves. Inevitably, it's that road that makes that the case. So anyways, we're gonna hurry and grab our stuff because we're running out of daylight and head on up to Merrium Lake. Should be about 2.5 miles. So I'm guessing if we hurry, we can get up there with a couple hours to fish and maybe hike out in the dark. But we'll get to our next adventure.
There are actually several picnic tables nestled in the pine trees here along the west fork of the Pacimeri. It's a really nice place to camp. We quickly looked the camping area over and then grabbed our day packs and fishing poles and got on the trail. At first the trail isn't obvious, but quickly enough you'll spot these signs. I'm guessing this is not a government issued sign, as I've never seen one that gives hours to a location. But either way, the sign worked to tell us which trail was which and a rough idea on how long it ought to take. We of course were heading to Merrium Lake, but the past lake trail would be the one we would take the next day on our way to hike Leatherman. The trail to Merrium is only 2 miles long, so not too bad overall. The total elevation gain is around 1,400 feet. The first mile of the trail is actually quite easy. Just a regular trail that's in good shape and easy to follow.
Well, this trail isn't as bad as it appears from my breathing. My kids are putting on a pace. Oh man, I told them we gotta hurry because we're running out of daylight. We got up here a little late. But man, they're moving along. Even little Cade, he's wearing me out. I like to say, well, I wouldn't like to say it's my age catching up with me, but let's just say I went jogging this morning. Wore me out prematurely. But we're making good time. What do you think, Kate?
It's fun. It's steep too.
Sure enough, it started to get steeper as we went, but still, we hadn't gained that much elevation.
We have just over another mile to go. But the thing is, we have another 1,200 feet of elevation to get, so it's got to get pretty steep up here pretty soon.
As we expected, however, we hit the steep trail section we knew was coming.
Nope. All right, 2/10 of a mile left. And this has been brutal. This last 3/10 with no end in sight. This is definitely where you gain your elevation, is this last half mile. Didn't look so bad on the app, on the map. But in real life, oh man, I am sweating up a storm. How are we doing?
Tiring.
Once you get out of the majority of the trees, you can really see what kind of country the lake is hidden in, and you can tell you're almost there as you're running out of room. Sure enough, the lake comes into view, a welcome sight after such a steep climb the last half mile.
I thought the hike was going to be pretty easy because it was only 2.5 miles, but it got pretty steep pretty quick, and it just kept getting steep. And we got it under an hour, surprisingly, and the sign back there said it was going to take 2 hours, so we're moving pretty quick so we could fish.
As we stood there getting fishing gear out and ready, we watched as there were fish surfacing all over the lake. That was a good sign.
I have a woolly bugger on from the last time I was fly fishing, and they're hitting the top pretty hard, so we'll see what they do with the woolly bugger first before I switch.
Luke thought for sure he would get some takes on his woolly bugger, but so far hadn't had any looks. Meanwhile, I set Kate up with a spinner, and he tried that route. Abby also threw on a spinner and tried her hand at it. With 3 different things being thrown at the fish, we wondered who would get the first look. As it turned out, Cade would be the first one to yell, "Fish on."
purple
Yeah, it looks
spots
like a
on
brook trout.
Kind of cool.
Yeah,
It has
it's a
like
brook
purple
trout.
spots on it. It's weird.
The white, that's pretty. Over here.
First fish of the day. Little brook trout, but we're gonna get him back in the water. I've never seen one like that. Got one. Tiny, but you know, it's a brook trout like Cade's. Let's let it go.
With Abby and Cade now having caught a fish, Luke and Riley were still at it with fly fishing gear. However, even with the dry fly on now, they just couldn't seem to get any action. Meanwhile, Abby and I worked our way around the lake a little to spread out from the others.
When we got here, the fish were surfacing all over. The water was really calm. The wind has picked up quite a bit. This has kind of been a day of overcast, a few showers coming through. It's all cloudy right now, and we've got a pretty cold wind coming down, and it's putting a pretty good ripple on the water right now.
I had a couple hits before finally getting one to shore. Well, kind of.
Oh. And it just got off. I put it back in the water. All right, I just caught a fish, flipped on the camera, trying to one-hand it there, swung it up in front of the camera. Did you notice what kind of trout it was? Well, I can't show you because when I swung it back over, it dropped off in the water and swam off. So I'm gonna have to catch another one before I show you what it was.
As you look at the lake, you'll notice a huge mountain as the backdrop to Merrium Lake. This is actually Mount Idaho, which is another of Idaho's 9 12,000-foot peaks. It's actually the 7th tallest peak in Idaho and centered between Mount Bora and Leatherman. Moving around the lake a little more, I caught another trout. It wasn't very big, but it was the kind I was after.
So this little guy here, he's not big, but I got him on camera, got him on shore for you, and tiger trout. So I had heard that's what's up here, which was part of the reason. I'm going to get him back in the water. Part of the reason I came up here to see if I can catch a tiger trout. These are my first tiger trout I've ever caught. That was kind of small. There are some bigger ones, I think. But anyways, brook trout, tiger trout, so far they're all pretty small that we have caught. However, you know, this lake is really more about just the scenic value and kind of the coolness of what we're doing up here. Obviously not going for this size. So anyways, we're catching a few trout. It hasn't been really hot. Just kind of here and there. The two boys that were trying fly rods have since put them away. I think they would still work really well if they gave it a little more time because they're hitting the top quite a bit. But right now we're catching them off spinners.
The next one I caught wasn't any bigger, but it sure had some intense colors.
Now that was a gorgeous brook trout.
With all these fish being small, probably averaging 6 to 8 inches, with a few going as big as 10, it makes you wonder if the lake was just stocked. After finding out that the tiger trout were actually stocked 4 years ago, that tells you a different story. That means that as beautiful as the lake is, it doesn't have much of a food base for the fish. There just isn't enough to produce good growth, and so the fish are stunted on how much they should have grown in that amount of time. However, that's just part of fishing high mountain lakes. Some grow them big and others not so much. They're all different, which is part of what makes them so fun to explore.
Fishing's been tough. We're getting those few, but beautiful country. It's kind of the sun setting. It's really getting time to wrap this up. We'll make the corner here.
Fish on.
As I hurried around the lake to try the other side before running out of daylight, Abby and Cade both caught another fish on their own, both of them being brook trout.
Well, I caught another one.
On the other side of the lake, I noticed a big increase in action as our light was fading fast, but like my other kids, so far all I was hooking into now were brook trout.
Just the typical brook trout I'm finding for here, but this seems to be the average here, so I don't know, I've got a half a dozen of these guys. Looks like I'm going to end the day on another brook trout. I was hoping for a bigger tiger trout, but I will take it. All right, so as you can see, the sun is set. We are on our last few minutes of daylight. We're freezing. It's windy like crazy up here. We caught fish. We saw a beautiful lake. and it's time to get off the mountain. So we're going to get our headlights out and hurry on down this mountain, get out of the wind. But what do you think, guys? Fun. Kind of a fun new place, you know, to come out here and explore. So, you know, we had a good time. If this is something that interests you, go for it. It's a rough road to get here and small fish, but you know, it's fun nonetheless. Now next week, of course, we're going to see if we can hike Leatherman. So stay tuned and see how that goes.
If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to the Jared Scott Outdoors YouTube channel.